the petitioner does deserve a right to be heard at a reasonable time frame by the deciding body, and that deciding body is also the town council. As far as I'm concerned, and what I've read, what I've looked into with the Attorney General's opinion, I think from 1974, it is, and my interpretation of it was that a 3-3 was a no recommendation, and that it moved on to the town council. And again, it's an advisory opinion. It's not a final opinion, so it was still had another step to go forward at that point.
Yeah, I guess I was questioning the way I got it from the chatter was that it needed to have a majority of the planning commission to recommend sending it, even if it was a neutral,
Sure.
to the town board, and that didn't happen when I was here.
Yeah, no, it was 3-3. There was a vote on it. So essentially, right, it would be, you know, if it would have gotten 2-4, right, that would have been a negative. If it would have gotten 4-2, that would have been a positive. A 3-3, no recommendation, or neutral recommendation. And so I checked with this with my partner who was there, the partner at my law firm who was here, and also Oksana, who's done planning for a lot longer than, you know, most people have. So she's an expert on this as well. This is her interpretation of it. This was also Mr. Farr's interpretation of it. So I promise I wasn't making it up as I went.
No, I appreciate you responding, because when there's things out there, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, 99% of the people that are involved don't have a legal degree.
Sure.
So we rely on, they used to call me, I was under contract with General Motors for 16 years, and they called me their common sense engineer.
There you go.
Because that's what I have. And I guess my other question would be, and I don't want to eat up time if other people want to speak, but I got other things I'd like to get cleared up. Is there a nepotism or some kind of a code of ethics that everybody signs on the board?
Yeah, there's everybody has to sign a nepotism pledge before every year. They all have those on record. So the question you're, I think, asking about is, was there a conflict of interest for members of the board on here or not? And it's, of my opinion, I checked with other lawyers on this as well, but no, that is not the case.
I think maybe by a legal technicality, because I studied all the states surrounding Indiana,
Okay.
which differs quite a bit. But here's my opinion.
Okay.
Since not all of us are legal people,
Sure.
in my opinion, the right thing to do, I didn't know about this till after all the voting was done, but why would you keep it quiet and not announce it? Because appearances have a lot to what brought a lot of the fire.
Sure.
The appearance of a conflict of interest. There's lots of times when judges will recuse themselves or abstain from voting because they don't want the appearance of a conflict of interest. And I think it's something you as a town need to do a little more review on, because appearances are important. And that's what caused a lot of people to fire, because it didn't look good.
Yeah, I think that a lot of unfair things were also stated.
I agree.
Individuals.
I agree.
I would say this, we looked into it beforehand. The state's very clear on what needs to be done in a situation like that, right? The question of, is there pecuniary interest, or are there any ill-begotten gains getting from that? And I don't know if you saw, but on the website, I also, the town asked me to write a letter, and so I kind of lay it out there as well, my legal founding, so I apologize if I'm not able to verbatim regurgitate, but essentially there was no pecuniary interest at all. There also was no ill-begotten gains by these individuals. Because there is no conflict of interest in that situation, that's really, you know, the individuals who are voting, their decision on whether or not they would they vote or not, right? It's not for me to determine whether or not an individual should vote. It's, can they vote? That I will give them my opinion on that, and then they can make that decision for themselves. But it was of my opinion and opinion of multiple other attorneys that I spoke with about this matter, that there was no conflict of interest in existence at that point.
Even if there was an appearance of one, legally, there wasn't. So, I understand legally, but like I said, we're not all legal minds, and then I'm gonna hit on one other thing. I live 1,000 feet north of the proposed site,
Yes,
1,000 feet. And the prevailing wind goes to the northeast.
Okay.
And the sound, I mean, Shelby is even over farther. The lights beam at my house, 10:30 on a Sunday. I've photographed it many times. But it's my understanding that somehow Lapel, in their planning and rezoning, this was gonna be a temporary thing and all this stuff.
So you're asking about Shelby at this
Yeah,
point?
do you have any authority over Shelby?
Yeah, so we do. We've actually, Oksana, myself, I've spoken to Mr. President of the Board Wood about this. We're basically moving forward with figuring out if we need to go into litigation with them or not, because from my understanding, it was rezoned in 2020. 2020 gave it for general industrial. However, I believe that it fits under legal definition of, I think, metal mining on the zoning or the zoning ordinances. That would require a special use. So I asked the staff to please go back and look through the BZA meeting minutes to see if we have anything recorded with the county on this. From my understanding, they do not have a special use. So at that point, I would agree with you that they are, possibly out of compliance at this point, and that something needs to be done.
It needs to be done.
So we've already begun the action on that, and it's my hope that by next meeting we will have more progress on
And who will do the code enforcement?
Who would do the code enforcement?
Yeah, because when I looked it up on Lapel's directory,
Yeah.
called the office.
Right. So code enforcement, there is money allocated to it. It's not a position that's filled right now within the town. I believe that we've relied a bit on Dennis, our building inspector, to do some of that. However, I think that this will be more than just a ticket, or you know what I mean? So I can't speak to you specifically on what we're gonna do yet, because we're still going through deliberation, and I've again deferred to Oksana, who's more or less acting as our planning professional or expert at this, and she and I have spoken extensively over it, and we plan on having a game plan that we can move forward.
And of course, that's one of my big concerns when we have a company that we're going to try and get in there.
Absolutely.
That has all these violations, and we don't have a code enforcement. I mean, like I said, it's the old cart before the horse thing.
Sure.
Planning should be responsible planning, not just planning for income.
And if, in my opinion, if you don't mind me sharing, I do believe that this board has strived to become more professional over the past year and a half, 2 years, if not longer. I know that I've been here since I think June of last year, June or July of last year, and so I know that that's been our endeavor to go away with the old, no more handshake deals, nothing of that nature, really do our due diligence on every single project beforehand, and also understand what we're doing when it comes to how will we enforce this in the future. So
I don't feel represented. I feel like maybe the town people get more advantages by far. When we done the voluntary annexation, and I was part of that, it was final, I think, in 2014. At that time, per law, it stated within 1 year, we would have all non-capital services. Within 3 years, we would have the same capital services that the residents in Lapel, because now we're residents. That hasn't happened to this date.
So are you talking about the expansion of the gas and
Gas, sewer, I mean, we're supposed to have everything that anyone else paying the same tax rate in the same location. We're entitled to have the same benefits. I understand the financial end of it, I get
Sure.
that. But by law, you said within 3 years, we would have the same thing. I had to put a new HVAC system in. I had no option between gas and electric. I had electric, period. I should have had that option.
Understood. I don't know the specifics of that, but I'd be happy to look into it. And then also, I think that that's something that I would encourage you to speak to the council about.
Okay, will do, and I appreciate you giving me this time.
So the long-term plan for that property that he's talking about that you say is in violation, is that to keep it, you plan on keeping it?
So I want to be specific. I'm not saying that they are in violation.
Okay.
Well, I believe that they might be.
Okay, just say, is the long-term plan to keep that company, or are you looking at not keeping that?
Well, I mean, we can't determine whether or not a company stays here or not, but what we can do is, if they are in violation, attempt to get a court order that would demand an immediate injunction, basically a halt, stop, work order with what they are doing.
Okay, so as long as they would fix any supposed violations, they can stay.
Yes, and it's from my understanding that they don't have a special use from the BZA, which I believe that they would be required to. Again, I still want to make sure that I'm not, by any means saying that they're doing anything wrong without, in my opinion,
Sure.
being definitive about it. But from everything that I've seen so far, I believe that we are going to have to probably take action.
Tell you what, my porch is gonna be done within a week. Come out, spend some time in hardscrabble, sit on my porch in the morning.
Yes, sir.
And listen to the noise. I guess, as I understand it, I don't know about concrete trucks, other than it's like someone's got a jackhammer inside of one of them tumblers going off. And we're 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
They're crushing concrete now.
Huh?
You gotta crush it, that's probably what you're hearing.
It's
They'll run that-
loud, and the
They'll run that
backup
all day.
sensors I deal with, the lights, I have no choice but to deal with. But I know that LKQ, one of the things they said, the lights would be pointed downward, because I know Mr. Bowman asked the
Right.
question.
That was.
These are not by any, I feel so sorry for anyone that lives closer than I do to that, because I put a picture on there, and I'm telling you, it lights up the sky.
Sure.
One thing I want to add too, just to help ease some people's minds, because I know this is something that I've been hearing about and brought up to my attention. A lot of people were concerned at the fact that with Shelby and the ongoing possible issues that we may or may not have, and the time that we've taken to get to this point, as he's explaining for the next meeting, and everybody's worried, okay, well, if it took that long with Shelby, is this what LKQ is gonna look like? So one thing I wanna say that I feel, I can speak for the board on this one, I feel, is LKQ involved every one of us on the board. Whether you voted for it or not, we've been in tune with this from the beginning. It's something that we can follow and see through. The difference between that and Shelby is most, if not all of us on the board, were not involved at that. So there's been a lot of
Mess.
a lot of catching up, a lot of information that we don't know, a lot of things, the files to pull and things to look into. So that's why that has been handled more slowly, and I don't believe that's a representation of how anything in the future would be handled.
Well, I'm gonna say, I do have confidence in a few people on this board and, or commission, and thankful that they're there. I feel like my voice wasn't heard. I've got a lot of legitimate concerns that I felt like everybody already knew how they were voting well before we even had our platform or time to speak. And that's just the way I feel, especially in light of all the things that I found out after the fact. It's disturbing. So I can empathize with how all the other people feel. And I can empathize how board members feel at some of the things that I read that made me feel uncomfortable. But as I told Mr. Valentine when him and I were talking yesterday, if you can't take the heat, you shouldn't be in politics. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You're going to get it clear up to the national level. You're going to have people that don't like what you're doing, and then you're going to have your fans. It's no different. And unfortunately, I'm not going to bite my tongue if I don't like something. I was raised to speak up. So I appreciate your ears tonight and the fact that you heard my concerns.
Thank you.
Mr. McMullen, someone, she can't be here, but she said, and this is just advisement, you probably don't even have to answer this. I believe the determination was made during the budget meeting that we can't afford code enforcement this year. just something to put on the back burner. I don't know. I don't remember talking about that.
There's a line item for code enforcement.
They dropped the budget.
Yeah, it was removed.
So you may want to look into that before it finalizes,
Well,
just
and
to,
granted, the code
if you,
enforcement-
yeah, if you're gonna need it.
And granted, code enforcement can be done not just by a single individual whose entire job is to enforce the code. The town's executive can empower individuals and employees of the town to go and add that to it. So, I'm not as concerned, but I completely understand, why somebody would be hesitant to hear that, so.
I just read the teleprompter. I can't expand on it. Just like,
Can I ask a question? Just to circle back on some due diligence, and my name's Amy, I live in town, if you guys need to know that. In regard to due diligence, nepotism, and this board and us as a town, I think I speak for a lot of people when I ask some of the following questions. The first question being in regard to the conflict of interest, whether there was or wasn't one, from a legal standpoint, was that done in front of the full board, and was the full board aware of that when that was happening? And if not, and if it's not legal for that to be, then that's fine if it's not, but I think that that is a question that a lot of people would like an answer to. And then additionally, what can we do as a commission or council moving forward to learn from this so that this doesn't happen again? Because if there are signed agreements, then surely there's a standard practice in place for if this would arise. And I didn't see anything in the ordinances, but I just moved back last year, so I'm just starting to figure it out. And I've gotten a lot of personal questions and I don't know the answer to it. And so I said, well, I'll ask if I'm allowed the opportunity. So I'm very curious, I know that it was brought to my attention that, there were conversations that were had to make sure it wasn't a conflict of interest, and that's fine, I'm on board with that. But my question is, was everybody aware of that and given the option to object or ask questions in regard to that decision?
Well, so that's a compound question, so let me try to.
It
go
is,
all
and I'm
through
sorry.
those in different ways.
That's how my mind
and-
works, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. So first off, let's go ahead and talk about the difference between nepotism and conflict of interest here. So nepotism, Indiana statutes and also town ordinance that they had to adopt, I think in 2012 is when that was required to be adopted during its passage. Nepotism really deals with individuals who are elected officials, I believe elected officials who might be trying to hire someone within their chain of command, I guess, right? So it would be like if a town council member decided that who is over, because we have liaisons over all these departments, if they were over, for instance, utilities, and they determined that their son would be the perfect fit for the utility supervisor. So they would be, the one directly reporting to that individual.
Sure. And I don't mean to be rude, but I'm gonna stop you, because I do all that with work, so I understand all of that.
Okay.
And maybe you're explaining it because other people don't.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, and it's not so much even to do with the conflict of interest, because now in talking with people individually, it's come to light that there really wasn't much of a conflict of interest just in positions and talking with people. And so I think that should be addressed, but I think the question is more so, as these things are coming to light, and if we've got these nepotism and conflict of interest agreements and whatever that looks like from a commission or council standpoint, what are we gonna do in the future to help ensure that this doesn't happen?
Well, so first off, I am glad that what the two board members that are on here did the correct thing, and they came to me and to determine whether or not they even could vote if they so chose to vote. With that being said, when it comes to the law, there are no requirements. If a conflict of interest is not found, there's no requirements to, it's basically a moot point at that, right? It's like saying, hey, did I break this law? And you talk to your attorney and then you say no, and then you go to your work and you say, guess what, guys, I didn't break this law. In my opinion, that's not a needed conversation. Now, they were allowed to speak to that if they wanted to, or not. What they can do in the future are if they so chose, is they can pass their own rules within their body that would say if someone thinks that they have a potential conflict of interest, then they could have all the members fill out a form and then have legal review, and then legal gives it to the entire board. That's a possibility. As far as I'm concerned, though, the requirement to tell other members on the board, one, didn't exist, and two, I didn't find necessary, because as far as I'm concerned, it's still non-biased with how they interacted about it. They understood the ramifications as if it were to be conflict of interest, because conflict of interest is a very serious allegation, by the way. It's a felony,
no, it definitely
right?
is. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so to have individuals, going out and I understand the idea of that there needs to be, or that someone believes that there should have been, disclosures on this, but to actually understand what conflict of interest is, comparatively speaking to just the general idea of it, and then go and flippantly say that these people are committing felonies and getting kickbacks and all of this stuff, it's rather egregious, in my opinion. I think that questions needed to be asked before just false accusations were made.
Right.
I think that's it's the first time that I've had to deal with this since being formerly a part of this town's organization, where typically, while neighbors can have disagreements, and they have, it's typically done in a very civil capacity. And this was just different in its own regard, and I was rather shocked.
I'm sorry, that's just such a delicate way to put that. It's been appalling is what it's been. And I think for everybody that lives in this town, we represent this town, and the way that this has been handled, and that's why I ask the questions that I ask. It's not to stir it up again, it's just like, what can we do, whether it be planning commission, council, across the board, to really put something in place to ensure that this never happens again, because what has happened is an embarrassment to our town, and we are representatives of this town. And if we want people to come into this town to help us grow and evolve, then we need to be better constituents, and we need to be better citizens, and we need to do our due diligence. And so that's just, and that's why I'm asking, and I appreciate the clarification, because I just think it's important, because I don't think any of us ever want to be here again.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. I grew up in Pendleton, so I did root for the Arabians over the Bulldogs, okay, full disclosure.
Get out.
But no, I love this town too. I have friends from childhood from this town that I grew up with, to the point that now I love having a professional relationship with the town and the people here. And you're right, I think that things, the way that it was, the displeasure or the questions at hand were expressed, have been done differently and better in the past, but that's my opinion. When it comes to how it was all conducted, though, since I've been on this board, I've tried to make sure that every single thing that this commission does, that the town council does, is above board, is legal, and keeps them out of any sort of trouble. And we did that with this. I did the research. I advised them properly, and I also consulted with other attorneys in my firm about their opinion to make sure that it's not just my opinion, but it's my firm's opinion that they could move forward.
Okay, and so just for clarification, to make sure I'm understanding correctly, because you had the conversations that you had and the determination was made that there is no conflict here, there is no nepotism, at that point there was no need to bring it up, because it was just a moot point. As you said, there was no need for anything, any validation, because it's just not an issue.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
not an issue.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you, I appreciate it.
There is and I've read it all, a small town, city code of ethics. And that's, to me, there's a fine line between, is it legal, is it ethical? There are a lot of things that are technically legal, but then you have to question if it's ethical to pursue in one direction or not. I want the people that represent me, as well as the rest of the citizens of this town, to be transparent. And I don't think that's unreasonable to ask.
I would, no, it's not, and I would say that what they did was ethical. They came to the legal beforehand. They came to me and asked, and I did my research and due diligence into it. So not only was it legal, but that's ethical in my opinion by being forthright about it from the get-go and saying, hey, I think that this might be an issue for me. Is it an issue? You know?
But that was their perception as well as the people in the community. If they had the perception, this may not be right, we better ask. That's why a lot of us had the
Well,
same.
it's not that it's right, it's can I
Legally
go forward?
do it.
So, I mean, look, these individuals aren't getting kickbacks, there's no pecuniary interest, you know, it's rather an ethical type of, requirement by, you know, individuals within government bodies to follow that as well. Now you could ask, is it a moral question on whether or not I should vote? Maybe, but as far as I'm concerned, ethically and legally, that's fine. So, but we don't legislate morality, we legislate ethics and legal, right?
I guess that my question would be, how can somebody ask a question if they don't know the information prior to it being put out there? So, like
How can
I
you
was,
ask a question?
so like I was the dean of nursing for a long time.
Okay.
And so if my students don't know if they give this medicine, this is going to occur, they don't know to ask me that question, right? So I tell them in advance, now listen, when you go and give that, you may see these side effects that could come of that. So no one knew who was related to who until after the vote took place. So we can't ask the question because we didn't know the information. So then after the situation, where do we go to ask the question?
So you're saying that you believe that the public had a right to ask the individuals on the board? Whether
No, they had the right to know who was voting and what their relationship was prior to them doing it. Now, I get it. We've been in this position before when the Likens voted for her son to be recused from paying the $186,000, $150,000. I get that. And her attorney said, yeah, you can do it because you don't live in the same household. However, Mr. Graham said, I would highly recommend you not do that, knowing that that's your son. But she voted anyways. And then the taxpayers ended up paying all that money, and her son only ended up paying $2,500 of that. So, I mean, that's the whole thing. How can we ask an educated question if we don't have all the information to ask the question?
Well, one, I would say that when it comes to asking a question, that question is not really pertinent one way or the other for an advisory opinion to begin with, right?
Okay.
So, and then two, the question for the individual that was with a contractor of a company that is looking to, that works for a contractor that has a commercial relationship with the company that is looking to create a new site here within Lapel and become a part of our community. In that situation, all I know is that these individuals aren't getting kickbacks from it, right? And it's not my right to understand what that person's, how much he's making with that company, what that deal is or anything, but what I did know is that he was a part of a contractor, and not only was he a part of a contractor, but from my understanding, it's not even the same division that's doing this within here. He's with the Indiana division, it's the Texas division, so it's rather removed on multiple fronts.
So, do we know how many buildings ARCO has built for this company that's coming, the LKQ?
No, it wouldn't have mattered.
Okay.
Evan, do you care if I
Sure.
speak a little bit? So, with all this, I'm just trying to help clear some of the stuff up for Evan here. Well, you're really technical.
Clear away.
We've established whether or not this was legal and ethical, right? It was
Legal. I'll buy the legal.
Not moral. There's a difference between moral and ethical by law. So Evan and I spoke quite a bit on this. by law, it was ethical, and it was legal. So the question everybody is asking tonight is moral. Should the individuals morally said something? Should they morally spoke up and inform the town? That's an individual question. It's an individual opinion. If you were on the planning board, you could choose or choose not to. If you did nothing legally wrong, you could choose to add or not say something. My opinion to the town is if there's something that you don't like about that, we are appointed officials by the town council. Town councils are elected officials, of which everyone in the town votes on. So if things aren't handled correctly, I'm a big advocate for changing at the polls.
I agree.
So to keep continuing to talk about it, if there was nothing legal, it's a moot point to continue the discussion. If, as a town member, you're not happy with it, there will be another election. And I think that kind of sums that up.
Agreed, and I will say, Dan and I has been friends for a long time, and he reached out to me when he seen that it was causing this big issue. Him and Landon come out, we had a discussion. Landon's a nice young man, and when people say they were attacking the family, I never would have attacked it. I was raised Trinity United Methodist Church over here. I wouldn't have attacked anyone personally, and I don't think I did. If I did, I apologized. I think a lot of Dan. I know his family's a good, solid family. I don't have to agree with what he did. I think good people make bad choices. I do. I have. And I accept responsibility for those choices. But there's just, I don't know. I just had a hard time finding out after the fact, whereas if it had been said ahead of time, at least I thought, okay, we can count that vote out. And that's my mind. But hey, I know you don't have an easy job. I get that. And you're not getting deep pockets from sitting up there and taking all the bullets. I get it. But that's what you were elected and appointed to do. So suck it up and take it. I mean, it's going to come.
Yeah. And that's why I was just simply stating, we could hash this out all night, but
Yeah.
if you don't like how someone chooses to vote or chooses to say
Well, they
things
got
morally,
polls.
we got vote, we can vote.
Yeah. And you're a good guy, Matt. I met you over giving you an annual look from your grandparents. You stopped out the house, and I thought then that he's a good guy. So I'm a pretty quick read to people. It took me a long time to read Paddock, but I read it pretty quick.
If you know Neil, I'm sorry.
All right, I'm done.
Is there any other questions? Go ahead.
It's not about the, oh.
That is fine.
Okay, that's okay? He's like, thank God.
Perfectly fine. Can you please come up and state your name and address though?
Sure.
Thank you.
Do I talk into the thing?
Yeah, just near it. You're
Okay.
good.
I'm Jessica Tharp. I'm 1213 Busby Road. Just sit back down or stand up?
Just stay here,
Okay.
please.
Question about the new development over at Tuscany. A lot of the big trucks are coming down Central. Is there a plan to, repave Central when they're done, and whose dime is that?
That would be a council question, wouldn't it? Yes.
Okay, I didn't
That
know.
would be something you need to bring up.
Were we planning that ahead of time? Did that come through us?
That would be next
Okay, I just didn't know if we
next week's question.
planned that
Sorry.
ahead of time. Okay, never mind.
So,
Yes,
I
go
have
ahead.
a question about process. My name's Clay Parkinson. I live here in town. It's been a long time since I've been on the council.
What's your address? Sorry.
9866 West 400 South.
Okay.
When we had big decisions to make about the town's progress, we usually brought it in front of the people. And maybe that's not a process this board has to participate in. I honestly, I don't remember all the process. But it seems to me something that is important as this should have been brought to the people of Lapel. I understand it's a zoning thing, I do, and it doesn't seem like processes were taken. And I'm sorry, young man, I don't know your name, but I heard you say, in my opinion, several times. Is
Yeah,
that
my
a
legal-
legal opinion, or is
Yes.
that your opinion?
My legal opinion.
Okay, your legal opinion. That makes a difference. Because your opinion is one thing, a legal opinion is another. I really think this should have been brought in front of the people of Lapel.
So it was. How was it not?
When?
Well, we had public hearings on the matter.
Where was it advertised?
In the Elwood paper,
Elwood paper,
the Elwood paper.
Elwood paper.
and we have a Pendleton Times post for South Madison.
Our page, our website, Oksana posted all the paperwork for this a
Okay.
week before the first meeting.
I'm asking the question.
Yeah,
There's also a
No,
sign on the
answer.
property.
I feel like I'm kinda connected to the town, but maybe I'm not anymore. Cause I never heard of it until it was actually going on. So, maybe my mistake, but it just seems like there's a whole lot of people that knew nothing about this.
We had a pretty large meeting the first time, and then the second time, and then during the town council as well. I mean, people knew about it, and not only that though, but along the way on each and every single step. So we were required to do a public hearing to begin with for the first time. Second time, it was Oksana's opinion and, from the planning, that they didn't, that wasn't required. I tended to agree, but then we also said that because this is a matter that seems to be extremely, I don't know, not pertinent, but, how would you say, people had opinions on it. We accepted public opinion twice, in between the recess, or how would we put it, when we tabled the matter. And then at the town council meeting, there was no public hearing requirement, but the town council knew that a lot of people had things to say on the matter. And so they allowed public comment on this too. They had the entire 146 pages, I think 43 pages, with the application and the plans and everything that was brought forward to us. The people could access that plan as well. So respectfully, sir, I do disagree that individuals had access to this, that knew about it, and were able to be a part of the discussion.
To form an educated opinion, you have to have all the facts,
Sure.
correct? Did we have all the facts?
Yes.
Did we have all the facts when this decision was made?
What facts are you speaking of? Can we go into detail?
Like the
please?
fact of where it is
Yes.
over the aquifer, right? We knew that. Did we know the amount of absorption from whatever chemicals come out of those vehicles into the ground, and how long it takes for that to reach the water table? Do we
Yeah.
have those facts?
Yes, so two things when it comes to that. Or sorry, did you want, I just find it best not to ask multiple questions at once so that we can attack them piece by piece. When it comes to the process, that was a question that was asked when reviewing all of this, is how does that take place? How does the process look with the cars? And the cars are drained of all fluids and then put out into the to the outdoor storage facility. When it comes to the soil and what that looks like, from is it White River, White River Authority, or I'm sorry, there's the environmental authority over the White River. They have a say over this too. They asked for soil samples from LKQ. They've already sent those soil samples in. So it's not just when it comes to all this that if the planning commission, sends it forward with whatever recommendation, the town council votes yes or no, and then they have to go forward and get a BZA special use on this as well, then that's not the end of it. They still have to go through the entire building plans. They still have to meet IDEM certifications. They still have to meet all statutory requirements. They still need to meet the White River, I forget what it's called. But there are multiple other steps where this still has to go to ensure that it's not going to be an issue with the environment.
Can I ask you one personal question to you?
Okay.
Have you ever walked through a junkyard?
Have I ever walked through
Have
the
you
tunnel?
ever walked physically through an automobile disassembly or junkyard yourself?
No.
Okay. I'm done.
Something I would like to add though, that Evan and I spoke about, a lot for my clarification too at the very beginning of this. And, you know, a lot of people are asking questions like you said about how much did LKQ bring forward on that kind of information? Well, we were only voting at this time to rezone. Legally, LKQ didn't even have to tell us they were LKQ. They could have just them and the Wilsons could have just came to the board and said, we would like to rezone this property to general industrial, and prior to the BZA step that they have to have because of what they are. When it came through us and council, they legally, and correct me if I'm wrong, Evan, they legally didn't even have to tell us they were salvage yard at that point.
They have to have some sort of plan, but I mean, it could have gone step by step as this company wants to come in and possibly put a facility. Now they want to do outdoors facility. Now this outdoor facility is going to require this all through it. We have a comprehensive process though. They were forthright with us the entire time. They never hid from us as to what they were. Questions came up about their past because that was a question that I had as well. From other facilities. The thing that separates this facility from the other facilities has to do with the fact that I think that they termed it the prototype type of facility that they've gone forward in different areas. So their very first project with this new type of facility was done in Southern California, and I believe that they chose that. And if you find something where I'm wrong, you know, that's oops, but from my understanding, what I've been told, they went to Southern California initially because Southern California has some of the highest standards when it comes to environmental ratings. And so they've gone through that there, they've gone through that with Denver. These facilities are different in the processes in which they bring the cars in, drain the fluids, go through their disassemblement, and then put it into the yard. I'm gonna pause though on you know, talking more about that though, because I'm afraid that we're gonna go into what's gonna be discussed about the BZA, and I don't want to discuss that too much. That's gonna be a question on Monday.
And we have
For
our
the
legal
BZA.
processes that we can do as citizens,
Of course you do.
Correct.
so.
One of the questions asked is, did anyone on the entire council ever visit an LKQ site?
I don't know.
I'm just reading the teleprompter.
Sure.
You said LKQ presented the soil samples?
From my understanding, they were asked to provide, and they presented the soil samples. Again, this is all a lot of processes in place. This is not just, once it's done with the BZA, if it goes through with the BZA, it's not just they get to break ground. They still have
Yeah, right.
multiple other things that they have to go through at that point, so.
Could there be an unbiased third party permitted to take soil samples that would offer?
Sure,
comparison?
that's IDEM.
Say again?
IDEM.
I mean, I think you can do it as a citizen, but you have to pay for it all yourself out of your own pocket, if that's what you're asking.
We have a member from the,
Yeah, I think you can do it, but you have to pay for it yourself.
from the MCOG. I mean, do you want to speak on that a little bit when it comes to?
Any permitting process through IDEM requires certain things that they have to do. I don't know if they actually have people that actually go out and do the soil samples themselves in order to process that permit and grant that permit for whatever property, whatever use, for whatever reason. But I dare to guess they probably do. I mean, that's the whole point, is that's why they're in place, is to safeguard these type of situations in the state from a company coming in and, you know, doing something that is going to hurt the community.
Yeah.
That's the whole intent of IDEM, you know, they are the EPA arm of Indiana. So, and there are multiple types of permits that they may or may not have to have, and one of these is probably what involves soil samples, water samples, lots of different things, absorption rates, things you're talking about. I don't know the details of that, I don't do those types of permitting, but I know that they exist.
Go ahead.
Oh, maybe I'm the only one in the room. What does ID, what is it, IDM?
Indiana.
Indiana Department of
Environmental
Sorry.
As pertains to the outside storage for the vehicles after the fluids are drained and all this, what type of licensing was there already licensing applied for specifically for the outside storage? I presume that would have to be separate, similar to that of a scrap yard.
Yeah, so, no,
Is that on file, I guess, currently?
yeah,
It's
I
life
just, I
versus
don't want to,
general, right?
I don't want to, I'm just trying really hard because I'm sitting next to a BZA board member who, I don't want to bias or anything else of that nature. These are all, the applications out there that you can look into as to what they're specifically speaking about, and that'll come up on Monday, essentially.
Are those still accessible, those 146 pages or whatever?
Yeah, so all of it's
Still
accessible, so the
online.
BZA, application is already online, and so,
Okay.
and the planning commission, application is also there.
Because years ago, it's my understanding that Indiana didn't grant licensing for scrap yards any longer. Yards being land usage, which would seemingly coincide with outside storage. However, there might be some minor separations there that would allow it. That being said, legislation could have changed, obviously, as it always does, but
Yeah,
I think that's why you have to have a special,
Well, so
meeting
I
or
spoke with-
something.
I spoke with Daxton Wharton about this. He's a consultant for the town, expert within government operations, and it is also my understanding during our discussion that Indiana has essentially, said that how junkyards used to be done are not allowed to be done anymore. Those are all grandfathered in. That there is a much higher standard for these to be operated for, and again, I think that, well, I just really don't wanna discuss things that aren't planning, that belong to the BZA essentially, and that will be answered and discussed, on Monday regarding that question. So I certainly don't mean to be rude, but, that is a pertinent portion, what you're asking, about the question at hand, that they'll be addressing on Monday.
also historically, there's other, perhaps not similar facilities in nature, as LKQ. I mean, there perhaps was a junkyard and there's soil absorption and so on and so forth. Right next to the water tower. I mean, that's been there for a gazillion years, and there's another one outside of town that a lot of people may not know about on 32. So that's not necessarily from a point of advocating on your behalf. However, is there any reports as far as, soil absorption from those facilities? Is that with IDM or?
Yes, there are. Historically, if someone, you have a, you can submit a claim to someone if you think there's something being done, like you said, on someplace on 32 over that, and they will have inspectors come out and inspect. But if you dirty a property as the owner of that property, you wanna sell that, certain things have to go in place in order for you to make sure that, you're taking care of that. I mean, that's part of the laws in place. But, you can go online, IDM, actually has what's called a vertical filing cabinet, and they've now scanned in everything you could possibly think of over the past, since the 90s. And they see all the reports, and there are certain people that, certain companies, certain properties that, they have to annually submit, just a gas station, dry cleaners, all those kinds of things have chemicals that, that have to be monitored for, potential hazards into the soils and the water and whatever. But all those types of reports are available online. It's kind of cumbersome to find, but if you know an address, owner, a name, you can look it up, or you can call someone and they can help you at IDM to find that type of information. But yeah, I know there are companies, anytime, I do a lot of stuff with roads, so anytime NDOT comes through and does a road project through a town, you got a gas station here, gas station here, and NDOT has to actually look at the soils and clean up those soils because they're stirring things up, and they have to clean things up. That happens, and those properties are already being watched, so there's records of that because there's a permit in place that they've applied for in order to have that business there and have that type of use, gas tanks or automobile repair or a laundromat or cleaners or things like that. So they're already watching. So this permit will begin the watching, and if they're in violation of an IDM problem, that's a whole different problem than something that's a town problem. You know, they can be fined by the state, and they would have to clean up that, on their own dime in a certain amount of time, you know, if they found them negligent of some contamination. This happens everywhere. So yes, like what you were saying before, there's lots of stuff that has happened before we had a good permitting process, before we had EPA, before 1990, before IDEM existed. We didn't have a lot of permits, we weren't watching it carefully, so anything that pre-existed to that, they're grandfathered in, you can't really do much, except when they transfer that property over, they're gonna have to make sure that it's disclosed to the property owner, and that they clean that up before it passes on, or if they wanna do construction on that property, you probably have to get another permit, things like that, so those are the types of things that are in place. That's the whole reason why we have IDEM, is for this exact type of situation, so that we don't mess it all up and hurt the public.
Do you have a question?
Just a general, simple question, and I think Mr. Lynn, so at the BZA, what exactly will be the process, or what will happen? Like,
What do they talk about there?
Well,
Like, what does the BZA do, maybe?
Board of Zoning Appeals discusses variances, special uses, stuff of that nature. What's being asked for is a special use. So a special use is like what we were discussing regarding Shelby earlier, Shelby Materials. Under our zoning ordinances, everybody else's zoning ordinances, I can't say that definitively. I've not read everybody else's zoning ordinances. But what happens is you have your permitted uses, right? Your permitted uses are, if I want to build this type of facility and it's allowed under the permitted, all I need to go through is that zoning, and then I'm basically ready to go to follow those zoning ordinances. Now, if I want to say, you know, if I'm looking at, a good example would be Pendleton, just recently, the new Dollar General that's going there, the owner of the land, who's developing it, went and asked for a variance in regards to the amount of parking that's required on the different types of the lots and how close they can get, because of it's, so they look at the site plan and they say the site plan's not going to be conforming within this part of the code. I'm gonna go need a variance for that. Whereas when it comes to a special use, if you look at something and you say, okay, well, this is zoned for general industrial, I can do what I want to do. Oh, but wait, it has a special use. So I can't actually start moving forward with any, you know, permitting and operating that business how I would wish to operate that business without first going and getting a special use so that I can operate it in that regard. Another example would be that sometimes you have zoning codes where it's a permitted use in one section that it's zoned for, but it's a special use in the other that you're already zoned for. So instead of going through the entire rezone process, what you would do is you would go get a special use to not have to necessarily rezone, but utilize the property, keep the same zoning how you want it, because maybe there's a difference in the amount of parking or the type of landscaping that's required within that zoning. So you say, I want to actually stay in here, but I want to get a special use through the BZA so that I can function in that regard. So those are just examples of what the BZA tackles.
so basically, the BZA will be voting on that special use. That's what's gonna be
Correct.
happening. I'm just saying in general, right? Like, that's what's happening basically at the meeting.
But I have a question, Evan. Does that also mean when the BZA does this, is it a public hearing, or can
It
the
is.
public?
Yes.
The public will still be able to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who on the planning committee voted yes for this to be rezoned? I'm just curious. Is that
These
public
guys.
record?
It's in the records.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Okay.
I did as well.
Oh, can I ask a question? I'm so sorry. Are those minutes available online
They will be by Monday.
by Monday?
Well,
Okay.
I'll try to get them online by Monday.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
One last question by this guy. On the BZA, and it's got a lot of the exhibits that LKQ supplied.
I don't want to discuss the
Oh,
BZA.
well, anyway, I looked at it, and what I noted was
No,
the
sir. I don't wanna talk about the BZA application here at a planning commission, just because I don't, I would please respectfully save that question for the BZA. So are you asking about a process or a specific
No, I'm
question?
asking why, I guess, that any of the opposition exhibits weren't attached and it was all the fours. Cause I had several exhibits entered in, that's always been in there, and now they're not.
Did you give those to Oksana, or who did you submit those to?
Oksana, they was in there originally as well as the letters, but now on the one that is being presented.
Well, so were they submitted for the BZA application or just the planning?
That was at the planning commission, but a
Yeah,
lot of stuff moved
so I would
over.
recommend if you wish to have something added to that, to please do the same what you did with Oksana to provide that, for that as well.
Yeah, I would hope they would be able to review the opposition as well as the.
Sure, and there's a
Material
process
here.
for that, yes, you can absolutely give that to
All right,
Oksana.
thank you.
Did you have her email address? Is that how you got it to her, or did you give it paper to her?
No, I handed it to her at the first reading,
Okay.
and it was in the
Old school,
minutes.
old school.
Yeah, and it was in the minutes.
I'll email
for
her
8:10.
tomorrow and tell her that you've asked for it to be added to that.
And there was letters that were sent in that weren't attached, so.
Outside of LKQ, is there any other things that need to be spoke about that's not on the agenda? All right, at this time, I'd like to go ahead over to old business. Anybody have anything for old business?
Was that new business?
Okay, what about new business? Anything for new business? Well, then at this time, I'd like to adjourn the meeting till the next meeting, which is October 12th. Can I get a roll call? What?
To vote.
Please ask for a motion to.
Oh,
adjourn
motion
in a
to adjourn,
second.
sorry, I was getting there.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey.